You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hello, Cheryl from Las Vegas.
Yes,
How are you?
indeed. Indeed. I'm doing great. So happy to be here. I'm very excited about this interview.
Thank you for coming. So, tell us, how is it to be the celebrity doc?
Well, it depends on the day, actually. Some days it's really good, and other days it can be challenging. It's actually very exciting because I get to do so many different things, and I get a chance to meet so many interesting people along the way, walking in my purpose. My intent is to deliver a platform to give people a paradigm that allows them to self-empower to optimize their global health and wellness so that they can live an abundant life of purpose. So it's really
That-
exciting to work with people and to watch them make the transitions to a healthier lifestyle.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's all we want, right?
Mhm.
Um, to make the most out of our time on this planet. Tell
Absolutely.
us a
Absolutely.
little bit about your journey. How did this all start? What's the purpose? Why?
Well, my why story actually starts with the birth of my last child. He was born prematurely with a lot of different health challenges, and they told me every year that I was going to lose him. And he knocked on death's doorstep many, many times, and then laughed and ran away. And we were able to keep him alive for 10 years. And all of his parameters were not consistent with human life. So we had to carry his medical records everywhere we went because, if we ended up in an emergency room or anything and they took his blood, they were immediately going to start doing things because they're like, this isn't even possible. So they had to know that that was his baseline. And this little tiny person faced so many challenges with such grace and aplomb that it it motivated me. I some people walk by faith. I don't walk in faith. I walk in knowledge because every morning that I got up with that child, I looked into the eyes of God. So he motivated me, not that I was a bad person, but he motivated me to be a better person. And he showed me what strength looked like. He showed me what pure love looked like. And one of the things that I believe is that if people have their most basic needs met, one of which is knowing love, then and only then will we be able to have peace in this world. And so my goal is to help people get closer to having all of those basic needs met, to meet all of the global foci of health. And those include emotional, mental, physical, financial, our relationships with family and close friends, our social relationships. And I put it onto a windmill because I call it the Windmill Healthy Lifestyle Platform. And those are all the blades of the windmill. And then the base is spiritual. And that spiritual core, and I'm not saying religious, some people are not religious and they're still spiritual. That spiritual core is the base, the foundation from which we exist. As long as that spiritual core is strong, the winds of life can come and batter that windmill, blowing those blades all around. But as long as that basis core, that windmill is going to stand and people are going to thrive. And so we have to get to the point there is no balance. People always talk about being in balance. There isn't any balance. And I learned that through this child because there was always something going on with this kid. And so we were constantly juggling balls. And I had to learn how to move the blades of my windmill around, focusing on the top blade that was, slapping me upside the head at the moment, but being able to keep the blades moving so that I actually dealt with all of the various different aspects of my life to keep things running smoothly. So that's how
Yeah,
I got started.
that's a great story. Actually, it's very interesting. The concept that you just described, it's an interesting concept for me. The fact that indeed there is no balance in life, and
Absolutely.
to accomplish something, you need to be out of balance. In a
Absolutely.
way, in a good way, not in a bad
Hmm.
way, in a good way. In terms of like,
Absolutely.
thinking that you need to be out of your comfort zone to accomplish something, and that's not a balance. When you when you look at people that did a lot of things in their life and accomplished a lot, they were not in balance and they were out of their comfort zone. And I want to
Yeah.
ask you here, what do you, how do you tell people this? Because people look for their their zero level, their balance level, their no
Hmm.
effort level, their
Yes.
comfort level, and
Yes.
they want to keep doing that, get
Right.
into their comfort zone. How do you tell people, listen, if you want to do something great, you need to get out of this?
Well, it's
It's a very counterintuitive aspect of life.
exactly, exactly. And I kind of liken life to a tango. Tango is a very beautiful dance. I mean, I'm a dancer
Me
and
too.
I do all sorts of dance forms. Tango is a very beautiful dance, but from the standpoint of the woman, it is one of the most difficult dances I've had to learn because you had to completely depend on your partner and you're at an angle and you're wearing high heels. So you're in these heels, you're at an angle, you're off balance. You have to find this precarious perch, trusting the system around you, which is the partner, not to let you fall flat on your face. And it's very difficult to trust yourself enough to maintain that posture. If you have the whole core, everything is pulled up, and you allow yourself to be slightly off balance, you create something beautiful. And life is like that. I mean, they call it growing pains for a reason. When we grow, we have pain. You cannot stay in your comfort zone and expect to achieve anything big. And if you want really big wins, then you have to take really big risk. And sometimes you're going to fall. And I didn't say fail. Sometimes you're going to fall because you don't fail. Even when you fall, that's an experience from which you grow. So it's not a failure. It's not the goal that you had hoped to achieve, but you do achieve a goal in that you learn something from that fall. And, that something may be just not to do what you just did, but there are lots of other nuanced things within that you take into life. And it doesn't matter what this fall is, how small or large the fall may be. Again, there are always these little nuanced things from which we can extract lessons. And I believe that we only have two purposes in life. People run all around chasing purpose, and they're wasting time because there are only two real purposes in life. One is to teach, and one is to learn. And most of us are doing a little bit of both all at the same time. And in these falls is when we have the greatest growth.
I love that.
So, no losses.
Two only purposes in life. I like
Mhm.
that. Yeah, it's like going to the gym, everybody is like, oh, we need to go to the gym. It's the most uncomfortable thing everybody does. I mean, I don't know You stress the muscles. It's a stress for the body.
Right,
But that's how
right.
you grow. That's how you become healthier. That's how your muscle grow. It's just so
Absolutely.
many other advantages coming from a little stress that you put in for 30 minutes a day.
Absolutely. And I mean, even within the
Um,
gym, again, it's nuanced because as long as you don't go crazy and tear things,
right.
stressing the muscles is causing them to grow. But no, not only is it causing the muscles to grow, it's causing the bones to grow and strengthen. And it's causing the blood to flow, carrying more oxygen to the body, to the brain. So the brain is growing and the cells, the nerves in the brain are growing. So again, so many things that are interwoven and occurring there with just what one could perceive as the small action of going and moving one's body. But it's causing a lot of different reactions that have positive impacts.
You said something very interesting. You don't want people to fail, but they're gonna fall at some point.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's part of the success stories, right? Success stories are based on countless failures
Yes.
before that.
Hmm.
Can you give us an example of something in your life that not necessarily worked out really well for you and you learned from it and, kind of brought you where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many things along the way. Um, I've had failed marriages too. Um, And at the time, I couldn't understand why I was going through the things that I was going through. It was like, I've done everything that was expected of me to be a good wife, a good partner, a good friend. So how is this happening? I'm trying to live a good life. I'm very spiritual, and I'm like, Lord, I've done what you've asked of me. Why am I here? Couldn't understand it at the time. First marriage, second marriage, it was like, yeah, you know what? Things happen for reasons, and I might not understand right now, but I know the reasons will come, hopefully on this side of life, but I know that eventually the reasons will come. And after my first marriage, I mean, one of the things I feel like I've been very blessed with is a lot of people don't see the reasons. And I do feel like along the way, I have been shown the reasons for what I'm going through. And in those failures, in the marriages, I came to both a better understanding of self and a better understanding of my partner. And in those marriages, I learned more about not just what I wanted, but what I didn't want. And I think that's an important distinction because especially for women, we have this fairy tale of what marriage and family and everything is going to look like because that's what we've been fed all of our lives long. And I mean, even as adults, we watch movies and the romances, and there is a cookie cutter model of what romance and relationships look like. And that's not real. It isn't real at all. So we get this fantasy of what we want, but that isn't necessarily what we need. And the failure in that is that we think about what we want, but we don't think about what we don't want. And then what we don't want is even more important because whether it's friendships or marriages or family relations, whatever the relationship is, we have to understand within ourselves what we find tolerable and what we don't. And then we have to find ways to vocalize or demonstrate what we don't find tolerable, to draw boundaries, to protect ourselves. And if we can draw boundaries, if we can communicate in an effective way, then we can have strong, solid and loving relationships. We don't always have to like the person that we're with. We just have to love them. And, all marriages go through periods where there are bumps, where you don't necessarily like who your partner is at that point in time. And it may be because of something your partner's doing, or it may be something that's changing inside of you. You're growing, you're stretching, and there's a pain point there. And sometimes it feels like, well, I'm not happy with my partner, but it's really, I'm not happy with the stretch, the pain that I'm going through. We have to be able to look and discern that so we don't throw away a perfectly good partner. And these are some of the things that I learned along the way. And we
Yeah.
also have to be able to look at the person that we're standing in front of, whether it's a friend or a partner or a family member, and say, are their shortcomings tolerable? I'm not perfect. My partner's not perfect, but are their shortcomings tolerable? If they are, we can move forward in the relationship. If they're a deal breaker, then we have to have the courage to say, let's just call it a truce and move along so that we both can be happy, and let's wish each other well and support each other.
Yeah, very, very important advice. And I want to go back to this notion of knowing what you don't want in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost essential to learn first how to say no to things rather than
Absolutely.
to say yes to things.
Absolutely.
Because by saying no to things in your life, you discover what you should say yes to
Yes.
in
Yeah.
life. And that's
Unfortunately, a lot of us don't learn to say no until
yeah, that
much,
we
much later in
yeah,
life.
it's a very counterintuitive behavior for a lot of
Mhm.
people because most of us are trained in a society that brings you different distractions and things in
Yes.
your life that you are forced to say yes to,
Yes.
but they don't teach you how to say no to them.
Right. And that particularly is the case in women, because as women, we are taught that if we are acquiescent, if we say yes, if we please others, then we're good women.
Yeah,
And pleasing others at the expense of yourself is not a good thing to do for the most part. I mean, sometimes we have to sacrifice, but it's not a good thing for us to do because, we're constantly giving from our well to others. But if we're not filling our own well, we're giving to the point of emptiness and then we're still giving. We have to be able to say, no, I need some for me. I need time to replenish. No, what you're doing is affecting me in a negative way. So if I can accommodate you, I will help you as much as I can. But here's where my boundaries are. I have to take care of self.
yeah. Cheryl, tell us a little bit about your practice now.
Well, my practice now is in transition because number one, I just moved to Las Vegas, so I'm not yet licensed here, but I am a concierge physician and I am mostly focused on mental health at this point in time, health and wellness, but mental health. I do longevity medicine. And again, I have this very global focus, but a big chunk of that focus is in spiritual and mental health right now, because since COVID, people have been in just a very weird and uncomfortable space. And mental health is worldwide our number one problem. And you see it because I mean everywhere you turn now, mental health is the buzz, and people are being good to themselves by addressing that. At one point in time, we couldn't talk about it. If you said anything that indicated that you might be in a bad place, then you were crazy, and crazy was not what you wanted to be. So what we saw is people did not come into a doctor and say, I'm depressed. or I'm emotionally hurting. And instead, they would come in and they'd have stomach pain that they had no explanation for. And, we do scans and pokes and probes and scopes and everything else looking for the source of the stomach pain. And that was traditional medicine. But nobody ever looked at the fact that there was emotional pain and that this person's stomach was twisting up every time that they got stressed. Nobody looked at things like, well, this person has absolutely no reason to have a cancer, and yet they do. We've now connected stress to cancers. You know, stress is the source of all diseases, because stress causes dis-ease. Dis-ease causes inflammation. Inflammation causes illness of all sorts and eventually causes death. So at the root is stress. That being said, we do need a certain amount of stress. There was research done back in the 40s and 50s where basically all stress was removed and children were put into this just cushy environment that with very little stimulation. And what they found was that these kids didn't do well. They had no stimulation, they had no stress. We're still relatively primitive. The Industrial Revolution wasn't that long ago, and prior to that, we were running around chasing our food. And so you had to have a certain amount of adrenaline so that while you were hunting the bear, if the bear turned around and decided to hunt you, you could get away safely. Those mechanisms are still in place. That fight or flight is still in place, and it's part of what keeps the system healthy. We're designed to run and move, and yet in the last 200 years, we've become more and more and more sedentary. And I mean, at this point in time, basically, you walk into a house and your average kid is doing this, and this is the only thing that ever moves.
Playing video games, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
And
on the phone or on TV.
yes,
Right.
and they've gotten used to everything being handed to them. It's it has to be right now, and the stress levels are rising because there aren't any physical stressors, healthy and natural stressors. Instead, we have the stress from artificially created systems, inputs that never allow us to shut down and rest. If you go into the bedroom of your average child, there's a cell phone in their bed with them. And it may be playing music or whatever, or there's a television going. My kids are adults here in the house, and 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're, quote, sleeping, and the television is on, and she wakes up each day and she's exhausted going to work, and she says, I can't understand why I'm so tired. It's like, because your brain never got a chance to rest.
I've read recently a quote that relates to what you're saying right now. It's very
Mm-hmm.
interesting and very clear. It says we are not really overworked. We are not rested well.
Right, we're overstimulated.
Yes,
We're
because
overstimulated.
the amount of time that we should rest and disconnect, and indeed like completely disconnect to the work stuff or with the life or whatever,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. We're constantly stimulated by something, by a movie, by a song, by a talk show, by a podcast, by something that comes in all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
find that the more rural people are, the more removed they are from all of this, particularly people who are really, really rural and there's very little internet connection. They're able to shut down, and those people tend to be healthier. They don't have as much stimulation, they tend to have healthier communications, healthier interactions, because they are forced to interact with each other. You don't have all of the gadgets and things that are the distractors. And so they're forced to interact with each other. They're still communicating with each other. We have these phones. And I mean, the craziest thing you see is people are in the same space, but they're not talking to each other. They're all on the phone. My brother recently, I just thought it was the funniest thing because they went on a staycation and they rented a lovely room in a casino and they took their son with them. And my brother calls me. And so we're chatting on the phone. I was like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be on vacation? He said, well, I am. I said, well, why are you on the phone? Well, Shannon's on the other side of the bed on her phone, and Dom is at the end of the bed on his phone. I'm like, then what is the point of the staycation if you all are not interacting with
Yeah.
each other? It was just a change of scenery, but there was almost no interaction that
Yeah, it's
transpired.
it's it's pretty sad. I mean, I've encountered some things, going to the restaurant, for example, and having the table next to me, a couple that apparently went on a date.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how many times they went that way, or they knew each other, but they're both on their phones, not looking at each other, across from the table, probably messaging themselves on the phone
Right,
instead of
right.
talking to each other. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it was a funny, but in the same thing, very sad moment. Uh,
Yeah, and I did see exactly that occurring with my niece. She had a little friend over and she was on her phone. And finally I was like, Marissa, I said, you're being really, really rude because you have company and you've been on the phone ever since I walked in the door. I said, and I've been here almost an hour and you've been on the phone the whole time. You know,
yeah,
your friend's not going to be able to stay for very long and you're not spending time with her. She just started laughing. Both girls started laughing. They're like, "Oh, Auntie, that's who we're talking to. We're talking to each other." It's like, but you're sitting 2 inches away from each other,
yeah,
But they don't talk to each other. And it's interesting because so much of the communication is lost when we do communicate that way, because again, it's about nuances, and we lose the nuances of facial expressions, of vocal intonation, of body language. So much is lost when you just put it to print and interpretation.
yeah. Sure. So, how would you redefine medicine these days? Because I think longevity and anti-aging and concierge medicine is going to a point that is reevaluating every single human habit
Yes.
nowadays, like how we eat, how we
Mhm.
sleep, how
Right.
we meditate, how we have sex, how do we relate to each other socially?
Mhm.
Like every single little thing is disturbed in this life.
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
What do we do? What's the solution here?
Well, I take great pride in saying that I was one of the pioneers and was on the forefront of both concierge medicine and integrative medicine. I come from a history of different medical resources because I grew up outside of the country, and then my grandmother was a Blackfoot medicine woman. And so I had a different understanding of what medicine could look like. Plus, I'm old enough to remember a much healthier way of living where, we really did sit down and interact and where we really did physically get out, exercise, walk, run. You got up off of your couch and went over to your TV and pressed the button to turn it on or to change the channel. So, I mean, even within our house, there was significantly more movement. One of the things that is extremely important is our nutritional status. Our nutrition, you are what you eat, and you have to let your food be your medicine. The problem with that right now is the food that you and I eat is very different than the food that our parents ate. It is nutritionally deficient. And so even when you're trying to get the nutrients in, it's much more difficult. But it is really important that we pay attention to what we're eating and how we're eating it. And that one of the biggest things that we can do is reducing the amount of refined sugar that we put in. Because basically sugar is turning into acid in your bloodstream, and we like sugar because it stimulates the same areas in our brain that crack cocaine does. Crack cocaine is very addictive, as is sugar. So, it's a difficult thing to get people to reduce the sugars, but it's significantly important. The other part, though, is, people are like, okay, well, if I check my diet, I don't have to worry about exercising. No, they have to come hand in hand because your body is a lot more forgiving of your diet if you're burning off what's coming in, even if what's coming in isn't necessarily good. Your body will try to find ways to balance that out and correct. Homeostasis is a state of evenness in the body, basically. And the body has its own balance. Each system has its own balance, and the body tries to maintain that homeostasis. So if we do something tweaky on this side, it will try and balance it out on this side. And it's really important that we do the things that basically are kind of counterintuitive because we think of ourselves as advancing so much with all of the technology and everything. And I think really for medicine and the health system to be effective, I'm all for evidence-based medicine in terms of we have to study, the medicines and all. But at the same time, we are the evidence because we are not cars. Each one of us is quirky in our own way. So it's nice to have that cookbook because that's what's happening to medicine right now on the traditional side of the house. It's becoming very cookbook. And, you go into a hospital and chances are nobody's really going to lay hands on you other than to just maybe kind of touch you. Sometimes they won't even touch you before they start ordering a plethora of tests. Now, I went to Tufts University Medical Center, and one of the things that they taught us going in was treat the patient, not the labs, not the imaging. And we've moved, the pendulum has swung the other way so that we're treating the labs and the imaging and trusting, the AI. But at the end of the day, we're still humans and quirky. And so you have to look at the patient. And one of the things that these systems can't sort out is when it's in our head, not that it's not real pain or real suffering, but if the pain is up here emotionally, that's going through every system of our body and it can disrupt it. It will disrupt the weakest system. So, whether you have an emotional breakdown or you end up with irritable bowel or you end up with horrendous migraines or horrendous back pains because everything's in a state of contraction, it's still coming down to here. And again, going back to our nutritional state has a lot to do with here and how it balances. So I would really spend a lot of time focusing on a more integrative approach to medicine. And some of that is happening because at the time when I first came in, I came in integrative and people would say things like I was a quack or, are you trying to be a witch doctor? What are you doing there? So it's nice to have medicine catching up with me. And it's important for that to happen because people are using integrative medicine. They're using alternative stuff. And if their doctor is receptive to that, they will share it with them. And those things can work synchronously. But if the doctor is very traditional, not knowledgeable, and not willing to be open to accepting different things, patients are very savvy. We have Google, we have access now. And so patients are reading up on things, patients are talking to each other, and they're coming up with their own solutions. And if you're not willing to work with them in partnership, then patients are going to either go elsewhere or they're going to take their care into their own hands without telling you. And that can be problematic because then you may give them something, what they're doing may be perfectly fine. But if you don't know they're doing it, you give them something that may not work with what they're doing. For example, I love ruby grapefruit. Love it with a passion. Best breakfast ever. But I cannot eat ruby grapefruit with the medication that I'm currently on. But if I didn't talk to my doctor, I might be eating ruby grapefruit because I think that it's a great thing to do because it's giving me the vitamin C, the antioxidants. And so this is what I'm going to do. And since my doctor doesn't believe in in integrative things, I'm not going to tell him that I'm eating a ruby grapefruit every day, and then I'm going to mess myself up. And then he's not going to know why I messed up because I'm not admitting that I ate that grapefruit,
Yeah.
So it's really important that medicine comes to a point of balance and looks at, there are three anchors there. There's the traditional, there's integrative, and then there's the patient and the patient belief system. And those things all have to work together. But in essence, there are actually four things because the physician or caretaker system is also a piece of that puzzle because that physician also has a belief system. And if the belief system of the physician doesn't match the belief system of the patient, it's never going to work well because the patient is always going to be in a state of dis-ease, and disease, stress, inflammation, down the rabbit hole we go.
Yeah. Well, I think there are many, many issues here with I would say the current training that medical doctors get.
Yes.
And, to be a successful physician, it doesn't necessarily mean that you order the right tests or the
Right.
proper lab work or, whatever, the technicality is. It matters how you look at the patient, like you said, and
Yes.
I I remember what she said when I finish my residency. I had an attending lady who was old school,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an anesthesiologist. So when we learned how to give anesthesia, she looked at me all the time when I was with her, and I remembered this all my life. And she said, "Do not look at the monitors yet. Look at the patient first."
Yes, absolutely.
And I nowadays, you have much better technology, much better monitors. You can diagnose everything on the monitor, but never, never
The
miss
thing is,
what the patient is telling you or what the patient is showing
exactly,
you.
or what the patient is showing you, because the thing is, I can walk into a room and I can tell you if a patient has diabetes or not, just walking into the room. And, the nurse is like, okay, how do you know that? You haven't even picked up the chart. How do you know that? Because I can smell it in their sweat. I smell the sweetness of the sweat. It smells different. We were trained to be able to smell those things, to smell the ketones, every smoker hates me because, they will hide their cigarettes away. And, some of them will say, nah, doc, I don't smoke. And I'll be like, yes, you do. I know you do. Or like, well, what makes you think I smoke, doc? I was like, I don't think you smoke. I know you smoke because I smell it. I smelled it the minute I walked into the room. I'm sure that you're probably a bit the same way because you're in that age range where you had that kind of training where we were trained to look at the. So I'm walking down the street and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, that patient has proptosis. The eyes are bulging. They've got thyroid disease. And oh, I think that person needs to be checked for lymphoma because those lymph nodes in their neck look kind of big. And then
Yeah.
I have to fight with myself because I want to save the world to mind my own business because not everybody wants you intervening in their health
Right.
situation. And it's like, have you been checked for thyroid disease? Not everybody wants you to do that.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
hard
becoming
sometimes.
it's becoming an issue, I would think, and with the present, I think the present people that are doing medical school right now, that they don't have an integrative approach. They don't have an
Mm,
alternative medicine
no,
knowledge. All these
no.
things um, need to be integrated into the proper training for a physician to be successful.
And
Um,
what worries me about it is that, okay, we have all of this fancy gadgetry and everything, and God forbid Armageddon comes. But if the grid all goes out, somebody nukes somebody, knocks out, the systems and everything, what then? Because for those of us who practiced the the art of medicine is dying and it will die with us. And if all that's left is the gadgetry, when the gadgetry disappears, medical years of medical education are gone. And you're left with people who have no idea what to do in terms of diagnosing and treating people without the technology, without the pharmaceuticals. Are you going to know what to
yeah.
eat? Are you going to know what plants are your medicine if you have to go to survival mode? No, they are not going to.
It's a very simple example for people in their lives. Like, I
Mm-hmm,
wonder how many people actually they go to their annual physical exam and they have a doctor who actually touches them,
mm-hmm,
listen to their lungs, do whatever the physical maneuvers need to be done, and everybody knows what that implies.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
there are very few people who are doing this nowadays. And I've had
No.
experience on myself also going to physical exams annually. And I was sitting on a bench and answer questions and, check boxes on a piece of paper. And there was it.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and that's very sad. And that's
Yeah.
very dangerous too.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, I was in the hospital not too long ago, and it was one of those things that I was very much paying attention to because I'm lecturing on these things and giving talks on them. So it's like, okay, let me just really pay attention. This is my opportunity because I'm going to come in contact with lots of medical people who should be doing things to me. Let me see how many people actually touch me. How many people actually examine me. Well, I tell you what, at no time at all, period, did I get a head to toe exam. I could have been missing eardrums and nobody would have ever known the difference. For the most part, even the ones who did lay hands on, I shouldn't even say laying hands on because it wasn't laying hands on. They come with a stethoscope, they put it out at arm's length and, put it on you and say, take some deep breaths. And yet they missed the fact that I have a heart murmur and not a tiny, almost inaudible heart murmur. I have a heart murmur. And it's not a bad heart murmur. I mean, I'm fine. I've had it all my life, but it is still an audible heart murmur. And I asked one of the nurses, I was like, "Did you hear a murmur?" She says, "Oh, no, no, your heart sounds fine." I said, "Would you like me to bend forward?" And she said, "For what?" And I was like, "Oh my."
Yeah,
So I
that's
gave her
101.
a bedside
Yeah.
lecture on heart sounds and told her, listen again, and you are going to hear a heart murmur. And I described the differences in the sounds and so on and so forth. And so then for 3 days straight, every nurse that came in was bringing another nurse with her and saying, "Oh, she has a heart murmur." And I was like, "You all are not young nurses. So that means that you should have heard a lot of heart murmurs by now. And you're fascinated by this." That says a lot about the education and
Yeah.
training.
Cheryl, you got the point in your life where you're comfortable with what you're doing, you're comfortable being uncomfortable, and you
Absolutely.
are successful enough to teach others.
Mhm.
If you would look back to your own self when you started this whole thing, what kind of advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, that's really, really easy. If I would look back to my younger self, I would tell my younger self to trust myself, to trust my own instincts, to take chances and not feel obligated to justify them to anybody. Because at the end of the day, you are the only one who lies down with your actions. And as long as you can be accountable to yourself for your own actions and wake up feeling good about that, then you're in a good place. And one of the things that I had decided very early in life, because when I started medical school, they told me medical school was going to change me. And I had to decide how much of me I wanted to allow to be changed and, assessed what I felt were the good parts and what were the things I could let go. And, basically did an assessment of what my true values are. And I think that everybody should do that. Do an honest assessment of what are your real core values, what's really important to you. And if you can stay within those core values, then chances are you'll get to the end of your life with very few regrets. And as a physician, one of the things that I do is I sit at the bedside of dying patients. And I mean, as a concierge physician, I literally do that. I see my patients out. And so, having spent hours at the bedsides of dying patients, um, you hear a lot of life. And never, ever, ever, ever have I heard anybody say, "I should have worked," you know, never. I hear them say, "I should have spent more time with family. I should have taken more risk. I should have been more honest with myself about who I was and what I wanted. And I should have made the time for the things that were important to me, whether it was, going up the Kilimanjaro or spending more time with friends. I should have done what was important to me and not let all of these external factors control my life, whether it was my job, my parents, my wife, the television, the expectations of the world. At the end of the day, nobody goes out with us and nobody has accountability for who we are but ourselves. And as young people, when we're very, very young and things aren't the way we, want them to be, we may tend to blame our parents. But you walk out the door at 18 or 21, 24, whenever you left home. The minute you walked out of your parents' door, your life, all of the accountability belonged to you. And I don't care what you came from. It could have been the worst childhood ever. The minute you walk out the door, no matter what your resources are, you make a choice as to what kind of life you're going to lead. And if you want the best life, you take the big risk and you follow through with passion. And one of the things that I was told earlier that I didn't necessarily follow through with initially, my aunt told me, if you live a life of passion, wealth will follow. Not necessarily money, but wealth and riches will follow. And I think that financially, that tends to be the case, because if we're passionate about something, we work harder towards it. And in other aspects of life, that is the case, because if we're passionate about what we're doing, then we're happy in doing it. If we're doing something else that's somebody else's passion, and it's not ours, it doesn't matter how successful we may appear, inside we won't be happy. So we're very, very poor. I wanted to get to the end of my life and say, I have very few regrets. And right now, where I am, if I were to die today, I feel like I'm there. I could go out and I could say, I have very few regrets. And in areas where I did have regrets, one of the things that I think is important for people to do, if you felt like you harmed somebody or you did something wrong, there's always time to correct it. And if it's something that's, irrevocably broken, if it requires an apology, then give an apology. Forgive. Forgiveness, people are like, oh, I can't forgive that person because they did X, Y, and Z. Forgive. You're forgiving that person is more for your benefit than it is for theirs. Because chances are, whatever it is that you need to forgive them, for, they're not that invested in it. But it's eating you alive, So yeah. You have to learn to let things go. And I would tell my younger self, let things go. It's not that crucial. And people aren't looking at you as hard as you think they are, because they're busy looking at their own lives.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure having you, and I hope your wisdom would reach out to everyone.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed sharing this time with you.
Are you a busy medical professional striving to excel in life and work? Stellar Success Podcast brings you the habits and insights of top leaders in medicine and beyond. Discover strategies for balance, growth, and fulfillment in every episode. Follow us on Instagram at Stellar Success Podcast for daily inspiration. Start your journey to success today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel now.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.